This is the Algebra 1 PLC data for the last test. The last test was graphing linear equations. On each of our tests, we cover 5 new standards, and these all cover the graphing linear equation standard. And we broke it down. Each standard has 3 questions associated with it. It has a level 1, a level 2, a level 3. A level 3 questions, that ACT question that they have to understand what the question's asking and apply it and take it to that next level. So my kids get this at the beginning of each unit. This helps them understand what's going to be on the test, so they don't have to ask that. They fill this out as they go, so it comes to them blank. After the first quiz, which in this case covered these 2 standards, they'll highlight the 2 standards that it covered and highlight the quiz and record their score. Let's say they got a 5 out of 10 on this one. They'll highlight these 2 standards, record their score on this one. Let's say they got a 10 out of 10 on this one. And I tell them that they need to use this to decide what they should study for their next test. So they should be able to look at this and say, okay, I got a 10 out of 10 on this. I can just glance at it. I looked at this and I got a 5 out of 10. This is where I really need to focus on my study guide and this one that wasn't quizzed formally in class, that they didn't get necessarily a quiz score for. So that gives them an idea what to study. And then after the test, we have this test data from GradeCam that we look at, and as we see, the questions are getting harder. This is the level 1, level 2, level 3 for standard 1. So as this is what we want, they should be getting lower. That shows us that they are leveled correctly. There are 20 questions on our test. The last 5 questions are old content. This is not what we want because we have already remediated this content. While the percentages actually, believe it or not, have gone up, even this one, they're still nowhere near what we want them to be. What we do after this test is we take those most missed questions and we look at them. We try to figure out why did the kids miss it. Was one written wrong? For example, one of those questions, the negative was right next to the fraction. So it looked like it was just a continuation of the fraction 1/2, and the kids didn't realize it was a negative 1/2. So that was an error on our end, and we tried to go ahead and fix that for the next upcoming test. We take those most missed questions, and those will be the last 5 questions on the next test. So after their test, the kids go back to this paper, and they highlight the questions that they got right in a completely different color. Usually what they find out is that they're missing this column. They're not getting the level 3 questions right. This gives the kids pretty good insight. They'll end up finding things out like, oh, I got 5 and 6 right, but I missed number 4. And we talk about the fact that that probably means they made a silly calculation error, and they'll go back and look at it, and usually that's what it was. They missed a negative or something like that. Or they just weren't paying attention to what the question was asking. So that's where we get to have good conversations with the kids. They'll fill out a post-test Google form that asks them things like, how did you feel like you were going to do on the test? Were you accurate? What did you notice? So that's where they'll talk about how they're not getting to the next level on their level 3 questions, or they're making silly errors on the level 1 and 2 questions. They'll talk about, I'll ask them things like, what did Ms. Thornsberry do that helped you do well? What are things that, if you did poorly, could help you do well? It'll ask them, what are things you can do in the future to ensure that you do better? And they'll be honest and say things like, I should have done my study guide. On the study guide, we give them a study guide about a week in advance. It's not required. They don't get points for doing it. The only thing I tell them is that if they don't do the study guide, I won't allow them to retake the test because they didn't do any of the prep work. They didn't study ahead of time. So if they don't do the study guide, we don't allow them to retake the test. But that's why we give it to them at least a week, sometimes a week and a half in advance, so they have plenty of time to get that done. Also, after the test, we'll take the most missed questions that we found, and we will remediate. So one way to remediate, like I said, is if they do their study guide, is they can come after school for tutoring and then retake the whole test for full credit. Another way that we remediate is we take those commonly missed questions, and they're going to show up again on the next test. So to cover the content again, we'll use them as their bell ringers. So instead of an ACT warm-up that day, they'll do the commonly missed questions. So my kids actually did this today. It's on a Google form. These are the questions that were most missed. They'll get to work together this time and talk about them, and then I will go over them as a class as well. And we'll talk about how they could have gotten them right, maybe some misconceptions they had, stuff like that. A couple days later, we'll have them again and we'll recalculate values. So they get 2 opportunities to be retaught this during class, to work together and with me as their teacher to try to get this content before the next test. So these 5 questions will show up on their next test again. Here we have our, let me go to Google Classroom, our Algebra 1 PLC. I really like the fact that we keep all of this in the same place. So we made our own Google Classroom. Here we can share test data, meeting minutes, lesson plans, stuff like that, and we upload them to Google Drive. We actually just uploaded a folder for lesson plans and things in our Google Drive and our PLC minutes, and so we can always go there to get them as well, and they'll show up in the same place. One thing I like about this is we don't have a common planning, so being able to put what we're going to do in here each day into our Google Calendar really helps us to stay on track and make sure we're on the same pace and change things as needed. So that kind of tells us where we're at and where we're going. Alright, that is the Algebra 1 PLC data from the last test.